So again, welcome this morning to join us on the Beyond 77 Vision, Goals, and Needs workshop. I am Agustin Rodriguez, the Transportation and Planning Engineer for the Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization. And it is my pleasure to be here this morning and be part of this incredible group of people that is working on this initiative, the Beyond 77. This workshop will mark a major turning point in the course of this project, of this study. I'm inviting you all to stay engaged. This is not a regular meeting or presentation, but rather an open conversation. Due to the challenges and the new normal of today's working environment, we make significant changes to this workshop. So we're taking a 6-7 hour event and making it into a 3.5-hour event. We also made it into a 2-day event. So yesterday we were able to meet with about 7 individuals from the committees. This morning, probably we have about 10, I would say, out of the 17 participants right now, so right now. And we're also gonna have an opportunity, if needed, of do Zoom breakout sections. So if we need to have a conversation or continue on a particular topic, we can do that for sure, and then continue with the agenda without delaying the rest of the workshop. We're also gonna be engaging you directly via some questions via menti.com or the Mentimeter. Next slide. And so if you have your phone or computer, laptop, electronic device, will be the www.menti.com website or link, and use the code 10478. And now I'm gonna go over the participants. We just have one more person join us a second ago. I'm gonna read the names that I can see on my screen. I have Judy Deller O'Keefe, Tyler Bray, Adam Howell, James Parhill, David Hooper, Jean Conti, Brandon Brazil, Dominic Boyd, Gary Fournier, Jenny Newcastle, Jessica Hill, Loretta Barron, Matthew Todd, Dr. Michael Miltek, Neil Berg, Wade Luther, Tim Gibbs. Did I miss anyone? Is there anyone that I didn't call? Well, again, thank you everyone for joining us. And next, it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Gene Conti. Mr. Conti is a former secretary of the Maryland Department of Labor and former secretary of the North Carolina Department of Transportation. Gene has more than 3 decades of public service in private business and management experience. Currently, he is the president and co-founder of the Conti Group. His practice focuses on business development and revenue growth for clients in transportation and telecommunications, as well as training and coaching leaders on those sectors. Jim brings to the Beyond 77 study the ability to articulate how numerous factors must be considered in mobility planning. His efforts involve much more than the traditional planning studies that we've done in the past. And now I'm gonna turn over to Mr. Gene Conti.
Thank you, Augustine, and thanks everybody for joining us today, particularly those who are doing this on a volunteer basis. We really appreciate your engagement, and we hope that you were able to complete the homework assignment. And thank you again for joining us today. This is really the only way we can make this a successful effort, is to continue to engage subject matter experts, elected officials, stakeholders. We look forward to our time together. It will help us to shape the direction of the study going forward and to continue to identify the important mobility issues across the I-77 corridor. Hopefully you've had a chance to view the story map. It's a really incredible effort. I've never seen anything like it, really. It gives an excellent foundation for our work today, documents what we've done so far in terms of gathering a lot of information about the region and presenting what the existing conditions are in the region as far as mobility goes. We're looking forward today to further hone our vision and further hone our ability to focus on the important mobility issues in the region. As the main artery running through Charlotte, this corridor between Statesville, North Carolina, and Rock Hill, South Carolina, provides that network of connections that allow everyone in the region and those visiting the region to mobilize and get their mobility through the day, whether they're going to work or school or just out shopping or recreating, whatever it is, they've got to be able to negotiate this complex network around I-77. The study is designed to address the dynamic growth in the region, to understand what the long-term transportation solutions may be to improve the ability of folks to move around and to continue to move the community forward in a positive way. As we wrap up phase 2, which is the analytical work we've been working on, and move to the solutions, we need to make sure that our foundation is solid, that we have the input from you today and others yesterday, and folks contributing on the web on a daily basis. In order to cross the bridge, we need to continue to define that vision and to identify those major mobility issues around each of the focus areas of congestion. We'll discuss those in more detail as we move forward. This will help us move forward to develop solutions and funding options and make sure that the region can continue to grow and prosper. We thank you again for your participation and look forward to a robust discussion this morning.
Now we have the consultant team. Adam, if you want to take us to Tyler, Bray.
Sure, thank you, Augustine. On behalf of the consultant team and everybody involved with the project, I just want to thank everybody for taking time this morning. Hope all remained safe with Isaiah's coming through. Came through last night and it's gone in the Raleigh area. It's absolutely gorgeous outside this morning. So hopefully everyone was able to remain safe. And again, I thank you on behalf of the team for taking time out this morning. My name is Tyler Bray. I'm a transportation planning engineer with Atkins North America, working with the consultant team out of the Raleigh office. And I'm pleased to be here with you today. First, before we get started, we want to do a few icebreakers just to get our juices flowing, our minds right. In order to do that, we're going to conduct some survey questions and responses through Mentimeter today. And so we want everybody to open up a browser window, go to menti.com, and when prompted, enter the code 10478. And as we open up questions, they will appear there, and you can provide answers. So joining me today, along with Adam Howell, who's the project manager for Beyond 77 from Atkins, is James Parkhill. James is a transportation engineer in our Charlotte office, and I'll turn it to him to lead the first icebreaker question.
Thanks, Tyler. Good morning, everyone. As Tyler said, my name is James Parkhill, and we have some icebreakers this morning to get us thinking about innovative technology out there, just get us in that mindset for the rest of the presentation. So our first question, if you go to the Mentimeter website, is in what countries are maglev train systems operational? and keeping in mind maglev stands for magnetic levitation. So allows them to achieve higher speeds than regular trains. Seeing some answers coming in. China, Japan, Europe, none. Disney and Narnia. Like the Disney answer. Give a few more seconds and then I'll go through the answers. All right, so the countries that currently have maglev technology in operation are China, Japan, and South Korea. The highest speed maglev is in Shanghai, China, with a top speed of 270 miles an hour. Japan and South Korea do have this technology in operation, but at lower speeds. And new high-speed maglev lines are also currently under construction in Japan and China also. So, and if we go to the next question, let's see. So another kind of train-like technology. This question is about the Hyperloop proposed system. So for a Hyperloop, what is the theoretical top speed if it were to get fully built out? Pretty even answer so far. I was saying yesterday, it's funny that we already know it's above 500. So I don't think there's anything that fast currently anyway. All right, I'll give everyone a few more seconds. And the theoretical answer is 760 miles an hour. So the Hyperloop is proposed to either include freight and or passenger transport. And it's basically a sealed tube or system of tubes that run using low air pressure to allow pods or trains to travel very fast with not a lot of air resistance. The concept was first made by Tesla and SpaceX in 2013, and there are currently test tracks in California and Nevada, and a prototype concept in Dubai. So, pretty interesting stuff. All right, I will turn it back over to Tyler. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, James. I appreciate that. Some really interesting technology across the world, and we're hopeful that we'll start to see some of that come to fruition here in the United States, and more specifically, maybe North Carolina, especially the Hyperloop, as there's been talks about that. So I want to go through some the process for this first session and what we'll be discussing. We'll be taking a look at the vision, guiding principles, and goals preliminary identified by the consultant team that were provided to the workshop participants today or earlier last week. And when we did that, we wanted everybody to take a look at it, read through it, be prepared to discuss any confirmations, revisions, questions, or comments that you may have. So we'll go through those today. Sorry. And after we review the preliminary vision, we'll go over any stakeholder feedback that we received. And then we'll go through those comments, questions, revisions, and confirmations that you have. We'll look at each one of these individually. We'll take a look at the vision, and then we'll take a look at the guiding principles two at a time, and then we'll take a look at the goals two at a time to foster dialogue. One of the goals that we'll have today is combined with the information that we received at the workshop yesterday, which we went through the same exercise, and today, the consultant team will work to develop a draft vision, guiding principles and goals based on comments and revisions that have come through the workshop, and then provide that to the advisory steering committees and other stakeholders. So this is our vision statement, guiding principles and goals that was sent to all the workshop participants to have an opportunity to review early last week and come today to talk about. I won't read from this slide or expect you to read from this slide. We'll go into this in more detail. But this is kind of the structure that we had put together, and we'll go ahead and dive right into this. So the preliminary vision statement reads as: the Beyond 77 corridor study will be a strategic, innovative, equitable, and comprehensive roadmap guiding the decision-making process for planning, financing, and implementing effective strategies, policies, and programs to strengthen the transportation system for a cooperative future. And so I wanted to just read that out loud. Some of us are visual, some of us are audio learners or receptors, and so I wanted to give the group and all the workshop participants an opportunity to either comment or ask questions or confirm that you think this is the best vision statement ever written, or just anything that you want to talk about to get this the best that we can for the Beyond 77 corridor study. So I'll open that up to any comments from our participants today.
And this is Adam with the consultant team. I just wanted to reiterate what Augustine had said earlier. This is a pretty small group of committee members, and I think that we can certainly manage a good dialogue back and forth. And so please do not feel shy, break the silence, and jump in and provide your thoughts and feedback so we can have a good, healthy dialogue on this. Or as Tyler said, just tell us that it's the most awesome vision statement you've ever heard.
This is Agustin. I just posted another type of revision that was provided last night. So it's on the chat box. We kind of identified a couple of items that we want to move around to make a higher emphasis. So that's another version, the one that you will see on the chat box.
Augustine, it looks like Loretta Barron has provided us with a question. Can we define how we will judge equitable? I know that is something very important and a word that has come up a lot in studies that you guys have done in the region, but maybe I pose that question to you.
Yes, that will be tough. Absolutely. That would be something that the entire consultant team and CRTPO staff, we have to really go back and and rethink. I think this came from that actual word was provided by part of the information from the Vision Zero and other initiatives from the region. So I do not know the answer really on how to define the equitable, of how to judge equitable. I will have to go back to you, Loretta, on that.
This is Dr. Mike. Looking at what's in the chat box, I think it's very powerful to include the multimodal concept, because definitely we have to get seriously looking at how I-77 and all of our connections interdigitate with each other in multiple modes of transit, because it's all going to come together as one. It should all come together as one seamless way of getting around the area.
Tyler, this is David here at RFATS. I like the reference to innovative. You know, so much of what we do in the planning process, it deals with the built environment as it exists and very traditional improvement strategies. I think given the degree of growth across the region, it's good to set the stage for exploring new technologies, new approaches, things we don't currently do. Because if we're going to extract the full measure of efficiency out of I-77, we're going to have to be nimble and thinking along these lines. So I like the reference to innovative.
Thank you, David. You'll see that throughout. And one of the things, just to expand on that a little bit, is the innovative, as it's written here, really applies to every aspect of the study, not just new technologies on the roadways or other infrastructures, but innovation in policy, innovation in programs, financing, things of that nature. So it really does run the gamut of everything involved in this. So it is something that is the foundation of what we'll try to accomplish.
It is good to hear. Down here in South Carolina, we're undertaking a series of interchange improvements, and I will tell you that we're getting into new configurations that have never been seen in the state before in order to keep up with the demand level. And it's a constant theme we have when we engage the public of why you're having to do a DDI, or we're looking at a directional interchange where you've got flyover bridges and you're having to reduce signals and to coordinate those along adjacent corridors so that you get the right operational outcome. It's really challenging people's expectations of what they can expect from the transportation planning process. So anything that furthers the acceptance of our moving into that new realm, I think, will be helpful.
And you do bring up a very good point about, as transportation planners, are we planning on an existing system, and are we planning for the future? And so navigating that balance is always tough. I've joked that I'm building a long-range transportation plan on an existing system, and a lot of times not able to really think like beyond what is there today. It is difficult to do that. And so that's always a challenge, and it's something that hopefully we'll be able to navigate through this process.
I certainly hope so. It's one that comes up particularly over CAVs, connected and autonomous vehicles, which is, you know, we're charged with long-range planning, where we've got this evolving technology running concurrently with budgetary decisions we're making today. And the question is, how are we making that converge between our current state of knowledge and the changing nature of mobility that is expected over the next few decades?
Thank you. Are there any additional comments or suggested revisions or confirmations on the vision statement?
Tyler, I'd actually like to go back to Loretta's question in the chat box and maybe see if we can get some feedback from others in as a part of our committee members joining us today, to kind of see what they may define as an equitable approach to through the lens of this study, and also kind of how we can incorporate into solution strategies. Because the story map we put out there certainly kind of highlights some data sets that are encouraging us to look at different groups and classes of people across the region, and how we can blanket scalable solution strategies to them. But I would love to hear from those that work and live within these local jurisdictions as to what that means in the Charlotte and greater communities around.
Adam, this is Tim Gibbs with Charlotte DOT. I just wanted to add one of the things that I know we at the City of Charlotte look at a lot of our freeways as being dividers between different communities. And so what we want to make sure is that with all of our cross streets, we want to make sure that we have amenities that would be lean to be toward being more inviting versus, again, divisive. So, wide side, nice or wide sidewalks, multi-use paths across the bridges in some cases, and opportunities for cyclists as well as pedestrians to not feel that going across I-77 is an impediment or really a barrier to their travel.
So that's maybe looking at equity from a modal standpoint, yes?
Yes.
Gotcha. And to everybody else on the call, I realize that it's a bold question to be asking of the group. And if you have other thoughts or ideas that come about through the rest of your day, or as you're commuting from the couch to the dinner table and something pops up in your head later, please feel free to shoot Augustine or myself some more insight as to what you might think. Because Loretta, you're asking a very good question, and I know that it's something as the planners on all scales certainly work to try and achieve some level of vision on how we can create whatever types of plan we're working on, effective plans for everybody to reap the benefits of in the future. So again, if you don't have those off the tip of your tongue right now, we'd love to hear those ideas as we move forward today and in the coming weeks.
Thank you, Adam. Any final comments on the vision statement before we move to guiding principles? All right, well, I appreciate that, those comments and those questions. And again, we'll be looking to combine some of the things that we heard today with what we heard yesterday and strengthen that vision statement even more. So I want to move forward to the guiding principles that we developed. We developed 5 guiding principles. 3 are here on the screen, and I'll read through them, and then we can talk broadly about any one of these 3, and then we'll move on to the next 2. So the first is to provide a range of local and regional mobility choices that are safe and equitable. So we can continue to talk about that as well. Respect the natural and built environment. And the third is strengthen the economic prosperity and resiliency of the region. So these are the things that kind of guide our thoughts as we're looking to develop solutions and strategies and different scenarios for policies and programs and areas. And so I'll open the floor up for any comments or questions or suggested revisions or confirmations of these 3 guiding principles.
This is Dr. Mike. Explain built environment.
To me, what we're referring to there is everything that's been built up around the region. The question was asked yesterday as well. I kind of look at it as there's a solution that we can provide that could solve congestion. For instance, let's just say Hyperloop, for example. But what impact does that have to what's on the ground? And so we want to respect that, and because you can have a solution that can solve the problem, but you create a lot more issues and problems. And so we want to respect that. We want to take a look at the built environment where there might be options for improvement, or it makes sense to adjust what's there possibly, then we could suggest that. But we want to be respectful of what's on the ground.
So, for
And
instance, if there was a neighborhood you wouldn't want to, that was cohesive, you wouldn't want to run a project through down the middle of it and break it in half. Is that an example you're thinking of?
I would,
yes,
yes, it would. We would have to really make a good case to try and do something of that nature.
Yes. Okay. I just wanted to understand what the thinking was.
yeah,
Absolutely.
Dr. Mike, Bob Cook is not able to join us today, but he was on the call, and when the same question came up yesterday, we talked about the what gets in the news all the time is that one little natural environment habitat component that is in somewhat of a danger because of some large transportation project. But the built environment is certainly everything that we interact with on a daily basis, whether it is that community that you live in, or the school that your kids attend, or an activity center that we all frequent for live, work, play components. And so not ignoring any aspect of whatever it is that we have built around us. And so take that into consideration when we plan things just as much as we do the natural environment.
And Gene Conti has provided some insight on how he sees a little bit of equity, and I think it's good if people haven't seen in the chat box. He talks about the new train station coming in Charlotte to Gateway, and about the station offering modal equity, and situated in a better way that could connect Johnson C. Smith with Uptown Charlotte. And so historically, those tracks created separation, but with this new project, it's being designed to help foster and heal that separation with different cross-street connections and amenities. So I think that's a good example of what we're thinking when we talk about being equitable. Are there any additional comments or suggested revisions or questions about any of these three guiding principles on the screen? All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for those comments. We'll move on to the next two guiding principles here. The first one is to improve integration of the transportation system with adopted land use policies, and to incorporate innovative improvements into the existing system. So those are the two additional guiding principles. I think that there was support for seeing the word innovative before, and you see it again here. And so I'll open the floor again to anyone who has confirmations or suggested revisions or just questions on either one of these guiding principles.
Dr. Mike again. Land use policies and mobility go hand in hand. And so this could actually be a two-way interchange. Not only do we need to plan mobility where municipalities are planning on doing with their land use, but also municipalities could be informed where we see projects coming, and so they can adapt the land use appropriately.
Thank you, Dr. Mike. Is there additional comment or questions about what Mr. Mike said, or either the innovative improvements guiding principle?
This is David. I like the first part about improving integration of the transportation system with adopted land use policies. You know, down in RFATS, we created the state's first MPL-wide collector road plan, and in fact wanted to make a very direct link to help our region's elected officials before they say yes to a new development, be thinking of how those individual decisions in the aggregate are going to either further or constrain how the transportation network is able to function as we continue to grow.
Yeah, it may come up later today in one of our discussions, but there was a lot of discussion yesterday about the connections and the movements around new neighborhoods and some deliberate decisions that are made and how those affect moving through those neighborhoods and those areas. So it's certainly very important.
We have a question from Tim Gibbs on the chat box. Do you have existing land use from plans from each of the jurisdiction along the corridor? I think we do for the most part, but I'll let either Adam or Tyler elaborate on that.
Yeah, Augustine and Tim, that was one of the large pieces of data that we collected early on from all the jurisdictions. And as a part of the story map that was sent out, that's looking through all of those individual jurisdictions. Everybody has their own way of defining land use, and each local place uses different codes and different notations, and they all have different needs. And so the mixed use indicator that was built and designed to help with our analysis is a aggregation of all of those built on a series of assumptions that were documented as a part of this analysis, so that we could aggregate and normalize all the different land use components across the entire corridor into a single set, which what David Hooper was just kind of referring to, he's got this great plan in the RFATS jurisdiction planning area that helps to inform local elected officials of how individual project decisions can impact growth opportunities in and around it. Well, that's exactly what our mixed use indicator mapping component is somewhat designed to do, is to help inform how we propose solutions and strategies in the local and regional scale. So we can certainly talk more about that. But in the short answer is yes, we have collected all of the spatial and documented data for land use planning components from all the jurisdictions. And that includes the City of Charlotte's draft 2040 future plan.
Thank you, Adam.
That was a huge undertaking, decoding all those land use codes and trying to come up with something that made sense. Congratulations, Adam.
Oh, thank you. It was definitely a team effort. We certainly learned quite a bit. And so we'll certainly be working with all of you to, in the coming months, to unwrap some of those and maybe kind of look and see, just as you said before, Dr. Mike, is it's critical to look at how transportation planning can impact local land use policies, but also how local land use policies can impact and evolve around long-range transportation planning efforts. So it's going to be an interesting ride that we go on for the next year as a part of the study, but a fun one.
This is Agustin. One other comment that we have actually during the section for the goals that translated into adding perhaps an additional principle under the guiding principles will be to ensure that we're talking about not only the interstate, but making sure that we are connecting both sides of the interstate. So the connectivity part and how we can move from one side to the other side.
Thank you, Augustine, and thank you, everybody else. Are there any final comments on any of the guiding principles, any of the 5? All right, well, moving on on to the goals. The team preliminarily identified 6 different goals, and we'll read through 2 each per slide, and then provide an opportunity for comment. So the first one is supply safe and equitable mobility opportunities for people and businesses to efficiently access jobs, essential goods, services, activity centers, and distribution hubs. The second here is to provide transportation corridor improvement strategies that will enhance safety for all users, respond to resiliency issues such as weather events or security emergencies, and adapt effectively to ongoing climate change. So are there any comments or questions or confirmations on either of these goals?
Hey, Tyler, this is Dean Goodison. Can you hear
Good
me?
morning, Dean. Yes, sir.
Morning. That equitable keeps coming up again. I want to make sure we don't let this die on the vine here. And as it should come up, we may not be able to define equitable right here, right now in this workshop, but if everybody could just keep kind of thinking about that and sending their input on what a equitable mobility looks like, help us paint that vision as we look for solutions in the future.
Absolutely. And just to your comment, Loretta, I don't know if you can talk to us through Zoom, but does FHWA have a specific definition identified for equitable?
No, Tyler, we would leave that definition up to the MPOs if that's a term they want to use. I mean, to me, when I see it, it means that you're going to treat all services for me the same as they treat all services for you. And sometimes that's not always possible to make that equal. I mean, to distribute them fairly, or, it's just how it was worded that I guess caught my attention.
No, that's great insight. And since you brought that up earlier, I've been thinking a lot about it, because there are plenty of areas where it's not feasible to provide every type of mobility option. And so how we carefully define that so we have an achievable goal or guiding principle that we can do. To me, the way I look at that is I think that as long as we make every effort to provide all mobility opportunities in every area, and then that is what we want to achieve. And we do our due diligence to look for those opportunities, whether it's a walkable situation, a cycling situation, a transit opportunity, whatever that may be, that we do our best to provide that opportunity to every community, and that none are excluded. And so we want to make sure that we try and achieve that. So we'll continue to work and make sure that we define that in line with CRTPO and RFS goals, and for that type of improvement. And we'll continue to work on that, as Dean said.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on these 2 goals?
You guys talk a little bit about what could be done to effectively combat the ongoing climate change?
Sure, absolutely. We've been involved, Atkins has been in some additional strategic transportation corridor studies along along US 74 and US 321, partly through this region. And one of the things that has come out of that that's very important to the department and is frontline to me is this idea of addressing and making sure that our systems are resilient. We've had a lot of flooding events here recently with hurricanes, and obviously with the one yesterday, it's on everybody's mind. And we want to make sure that we are identifying what needs to be done for those issues, and for anything that may be coming in the years to come that we necessarily haven't addressed in the past, that we want to try and be proactive and make sure that our systems are adaptable to those ongoing changes. What that actually comes out to mean, I don't think that the team is prepared in that and to discuss it yet, but we'll continue to look for ways to adapt to those coming changes. Augustine or
Thanks.
Adam, did you want to add anything to that, or Tim?
I just want to say I appreciate you mentioning that. I think it is certainly something to take a look at, and I appreciate that that's part of what you guys are going to be mindful of as we move forward.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Tim.
Tim, and Tyler's spot on. I mean, Atkins is doing some great local work across the state of North Carolina, but across other parts of the country. And it's obviously more about, instead of just looking at sea level rise or anything like that, of course, temperatures are rising, and that has an impact on our infrastructure that we build, and some of the innovation that may go into what types of material is used to build roadways, or what types of sensors could be employed. And I know that we have recently completed some work with the city of Charlotte to look at pavement conditions along local roadways and trying to understand new ways of assessing that for inventory purposes. So like Tyler said, we are certainly not at the point to help define what that is, but we certainly know that it needs to be at the center of what we're discussing, and it's why it's specifically called out as one of the goals.
One of the things also that we can do here, there may be aspects along this corridor. It's so long, and there's so many intricate things here. There's going to be an opportunity here to identify issues and other things that need additional study, that cannot be handled solely through this, and frankly are not given the due diligence through a study like this, and really need to be further evaluated. And so as we go through this process, if there are specific things that we feel need that extra attention, we can identify those areas for additional study throughout the region that really need some extra effort to move forward.
And I want to add one more thing on this particular goal, is the fact that a lot of times in transportation, we react. So for instance, when we have changes on policies or ordinances, such as the storm post-construction ordinance, then we all going around trying to figure, okay, this new policy is affecting us, and how we're designing and how we are preparing for transportation projects. And so it's trying also at the same time to capture those kind of changes.
Yep. Thank you, Augustine. Any other comments on these two goals before we move on to the next ones? All right. Well, our next two goals are on the screen. Consider technology applications in all transportation strategy decisions, including enhanced techniques for transportation management coordination. And then the second on this slide is maximize transportation opportunities to enhance freight connectivity and improving the movement of goods. So I'll open it up for any comments or questions about either one of these goals. And just to clarify a little bit on the first one here, we had talked a little bit about innovation and technology before, but we want to make sure that we are looking at innovative options through all aspects of the transportation process, whether that's infrastructure or programs or policies or financing or whatever it might be, but we apply that across the board.
This is Agustin. One comment that we have from last night was in regards the freight, and part of the keyword that was on the previous slide about distribution hubs and how we can join that definition of the keyword of distribution hubs into this altogether as a kind of trucking and freight mobility goal.
Thank you, Augustine. Any other questions or confirmations on either one of these goals?
Dr. Mike again, have we identified where these transportation freight hubs are? Is that part of that show map data, Adam? Have we? Okay.
Adam, if there's something specific on there, I can bring it up and show the team.
I know the truck stops are labeled. There was a slide specifically for them, but where about the actual hubs where they switch out the freight?
So those are not included as a part of the story map in terms of, let me use my words right. We were specifically focusing on where issues were intact along the corridor itself. We weren't necessarily focused initially on where those distribution centers may lie, but CDM Smith, who's a part of our team, who also worked with the Central Atlanta Council of Governments to conduct the recent Charlotte Freight Mobility Study, have been insightful to kind of help us understand the intricate details of that, and we'll continue to do so as we move forward with the solutions component. I don't know if Jessica Hill, I believe she's on the call, has anything else to add that from that study that may add some additional insight for us moving forward.
Hi, Adam. Yeah, this is Jessica. I'm on the call. I think, around freight, the biggest things are efficiency, safety, and reliability. And I know a big conversation that we've had today is on equity. So I guess I would just throw into the conversation, I know transportation always revolves around kind of that safety aspect, but I think we can't forget that as well in the conversation. I was just looking over the guiding principles and goals and not really seeing safety jump out too much, but a lot of equity, which is not a bad thing, but just want to make sure we're not leaving something out. And in terms of, from a freight perspective, I think some of the biggest things are related to safety, and then with that component of being land use, there's not a lot of truck parking along the I-77 corridor once you get into the urban onto the urban network. And so from a safety aspect for freight, that's kind of concerning. But we do have, at least in 2016 when we did the freight plan, we did map all freight related land uses.
Okay. So Dr. Mike, we'll certainly be reviewing that map in more detail that Jessica referred to. And August, I don't know if you want to comment on Jessica's question about the notion of safety.
No further comments. We do have a couple of comments or questions from Brandon Brazil, and then a comment from Neil Berg. So from Brandon, these goals look a little broad. How can these be refined to be more measurable so that we know what success looks like in achieving each goal? So really good question. I guess my first answer to that would be, what would be some of those recommendations from this group? What will be a couple of ways that we can probably redefine some of these goals? Because we realize it's pretty broad in general. Okay.
Hey, Augustine, this is Jessica again. To answer your question, I mean, I guess what the point that Brandon's trying to get at is trying to make these a little bit closer to SMART goals. And especially with performance measurements, the question is what data do you have access to? And what can you use to see if there's been a positive or negative change? So without knowing what data sets you want to use, it's kind of hard to answer your question right now. But I would say take a look at what data you have access to from a transportation system perspective or even land use perspective.
Thank you, Jessica.
And this is Tyler. I think one of the challenges here is that when you get a little bit more specific into goals, you get into being able to provide a metric and a measure for if that has been achieved. For this type of study, that is a little bit more difficult because we're not looking at specifically into a lot of potential projects or recommendations in that area. So it's a little bit more difficult if you get into specific goals about what you want to achieve. For instance, if you're looking at the MTP and you have an achievable goal, then you, like, let's say of congestion in a certain area, well, you know that if you apply this project or this project, then you can get to where you want to be. For this, if we're talking about we want to consider technology applications in all of our strategy decisions, then if we do provide a laundry list of options and toolboxes for technologies or recommend where we think those should be applicable, then we're achieving that goal. There probably is the opportunity for some of these for us to take a look at in more specific terms and see if there is that information available once we evaluate the goals at the end, see if we've achieved what we wanted to achieve from the study. So we will definitely take a look at that and look for areas of refinement. So Brandon, appreciate that comment.
And the comment from Neil Berg, before we move to the next goals, another consideration is truck parking availability along the corridor when carriers reach their federally mandated daily hours of operation. There is one pair of rest areas at the state line, and I frequently see trucks stopping on interchange ramps to rest. So more certainly, this is something that, as part of that freight connectivity improvement, I think we have to include. So really good comment. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you, Augustine. Thank you, Neil. Are there any other comments on these two goals before we move to the final two? All right. This final two, I'll just read through. You'll see some similar themes here. Integrate walking, bicycling, and transit options with motor vehicles by providing transportation improvement strategies that serve the public with equitable mobility choices. And then the last one here is to ensure recommended transportation policies and programs are sensitive to significant features of the build, it's supposed to be built, and natural environments, improve the quality of life for residents, and promote healthy living. So we'll open up the floor to anybody with any questions or comments on either one of these goals.
You may want to add to the first list of goal, public with equitable, safe mobility choices. We need to get some safety comments into these goals.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I'll certainly look to incorporate that everywhere. Obviously, for a lot of things we do, safety is obviously number one. If it's not safe, then it's not useful.
Yeah,
So we want to make sure that's a part of everything.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, safety is always present, so it's an assumption, and you forget to list it in your goals because you assume it's going to be there.
Absolutely, it's a very good point. I think making sure that it's up front and in your face is definitely important.
Hey, Tyler, this is Curtis with CRTPO. This is kind of a picky, almost wordsmithing type of thing, but walking, bicycling, and transit, is there any way to integrate personal mobility into as one of those options? Just because we don't know what mobility is going to look like, 10, 20 years down the road, then maybe they leave it open enough to fit in some new technologies.
So when you say personal mobility, could you define that just a little bit more?
Well, it's throwing in things like, scooters or e-bikes or other mobility options for walking and bicycling and other forms of transportation that are more personal, not transit, not necessarily single occupancy vehicles. But it's just kind of a catch-all term for different technologies that either do exist now or may exist in the near or medium-term future.
Maybe in one of the comments yesterday that was brought up by Bob Cook, which I think is very important, is making sure that when we are evaluating the vision, the guiding principles, and the goals, to make sure that it's understandable by the public and that we're not using our technical savvy to things that we understand, but we want to make sure that everybody understands it. And one of the things that we talked about is using the term multimodal. And I'm thinking, if for this first goal in this slide, maybe it's something of integrate multimodal personal mobility and motor vehicle options, and maybe writing it in that way. But we'll certainly make sure to include personal mobility as that becomes ever more present, especially in our urban centers.
That sounds good. Just want to make sure that we're kind of considering that. Option.
Absolutely. No, that's very important. Absolutely, because they're not waiting on us. They're coming. So they're already here. And so we need to make sure that that's part of the things that we are considering, especially when you're talking about equitable mobility choices there in that goal. Thank you.
Yep. Dr. Mike again. One of the options, our issues at being a lake community is the use of golf carts. How do we incorporate them in our transit planning? And also, you're going to see a lot more little electronic wheelchair type of things. As our population gets older, more and more people are going to get these little mobility scooters. And are they allowed on sidewalks? How can they cross intersections? So that's an issue we're dealing with in our community.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Mike. That is very important. One of the things that we talked about yesterday is making sure in some ways that everything that we're doing is ADA compliant and that we are considering that. So what you mentioned is very much in line with some of the discussions we had yesterday. So thank you. Any other comments on these final two goals before we go into recapping the discussion in this first session this morning? All right, well, thank you everybody for the discussion on vision, guiding principles, and goals. Definitely appreciate all the comments received, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Howell to discuss and recap some of the things that we talked about this morning so far.
Very good. Thanks, Tyler, and thanks everybody for a good dialogue. I think we've heard a lot of really good feedback, and same with yesterday, some similar things, but also some great feedback that also added to the conversation. Do want to just emphasize for those that still may be thinking about it or are going to provide some written feedback, would still love to hear about what your definition for equitable mobility means and what that means to you for your community and the region as a whole. And we'll certainly be looking to understand how we can maybe incorporate some level of measurability or targets within these goals. But as Tyler mentioned, this is a much larger study that may not be able to incorporate some very specific targets, and those will come through as recommendations for subsequent efforts coming down the pipeline. We will certainly be looking to incorporate many of the comments that you provided today, and as a part of this, the outcome is to have a draft set of vision, guiding principles, and goals from today's conversation as well as yesterday, and then we will work as a consultant team to align and bring in everything together to then present to them as a next step so that we can finalize those and then move forward with our solutions and strategies recommendations process in the fall. With that, Tyler, I'll throw it back to you, and we'll really see if there's any other additional questions or comments as well from the group or from the consultant team.
Thank you, Adam. So are there any additional comments or questions on any of the vision, guiding principles, or goals? All right. Well, I appreciate everybody's comments and all of the discussion this morning. So right now, we're going to go ahead and take our 10-minute break, and we'll come back at about 9:50, and we'll get started. And we will go through some of the homework and the information that we received and talk about the mobility issues along the 12 identified focus areas of congestion. So we will see everybody back here about 9:50. Thank you. Appreciate all of the discussion this morning. Look forward to continued this discussion in our second session. So before we get started, want to do a few icebreakers just to get our brains reoriented here. So hopefully you still have the browser open to menti.com. If not, go ahead and open that up. The code again is 10478, and we will go over to, oh, hold on one second. Sorry about that. Let's stay right here, and we'll go over to the first icebreaker. And I'll turn it over to James Parkhill.
Thanks, Tyler. So let everyone make their way over to menti.com again. And for our second round of icebreakers, we're looking a little bit more local. So the first question that we have is, what micro-mobility e-scooter options are currently available in Charlotte? And these would be like the names of the apps or the companies or the brands, whatever you want to call it. Yesterday, we also had someone just submit the colors of the scooters, which I liked. That's a little more easy to remember. So far we have everyone saying lime. Yeah, exactly. Someone said the black and orange one.
I think it's safe to say here that Lime has done a very good job of marketing their product.
Yeah, good branding. I wonder if they're I think they might have been the first one that came to Charlotte. I'm not sure. Give a few more seconds.
This is interesting. Nobody knows that third company, huh?
Yeah, same thing happened yesterday
The
too.
same thing happens, yes.
So one of them needs to work on their branding. Okay, yeah.
There you go.
Now we have the third one. Okay, so yep, so those are the three. It's currently Lime, Bird, and Spin. And one thing I thought was interesting is Charlotte has been doing an ongoing program with Lime scooters, as well as Passport, which is a transportation tech company, to test how to manage some issues with the scooter rollout, such as scooter parking, managing demand, fees, other challenges. Um, if you've been around some of the high scooter areas in Charlotte, you've probably seen the scooters can often end up just kind of piled off to the side or even blocking the sidewalk. So that's one innovative way Charlotte has been looking into how to manage the parking. So I think it's called geofencing, but determining the areas where you can and cannot drop off your scooter. So moving on to our next question, which is about how many trips were made on scooters during March 2020 in Charlotte.
And just another little additional fun fact there, James. I don't know if people know this, but that company reference Passport is headquartered here in Charlotte, and they were a startup company almost a decade ago and have continued to see incredible success across the country and the nation, and doing great work here locally. So they'll be a part of our stakeholder group when we move forward in the fall.
That's good to know. I didn't know that. Charlotte based. Give everyone a few more seconds. We've already gotten some answers for how many trips happened in March. And the total trips that happened in March just in Charlotte was over 50,000. And so then of course in April, when COVID-19 really hit, there were 0 trips as the scooters had to be taken off the roads, off the greenways. But judging by the latest data, trips have been climbing back. So last month in June, there were about 32,000 trips. So they are still being actively used today.
Thank you, James.
So yeah, thank you, Tyler. I'll give it back over to you.
All right. So for this second session, we'll be discussing the mobility issues in the 12 focus areas of congestion. So early last week, the consultant team sent over a quote unquote homework assignment for everybody. We wanted to provide the workshop participants with the opportunity to take a look at all 12 of the focus areas of congestion and then the 7 different mobility issue options for those 12 areas, and then select which ones they felt that are present or heavily present in those different focus areas. And so we'll go through here in a second, reviewing the focus areas of congestion. We'll talk about the results for the homework, and we'll talk about comments or questions or other things about each one of these focus areas when crossed with the mobility issues. And then hopefully by the end, we will have a draft list of the identified mobility issues in each focus area and focusing on which ones are the most prevalent and highly identified. So one of the things that we will be doing for each one of these focus areas is giving all of the participants today an opportunity to also choose in real time what they think are the mobility issues in each focus area, and then we'll compare those to the information that we received from the homework. We did this exercise yesterday. It was really enlightening to see what the participants here had to say versus what we overall heard from all workshop participants. So in some cases they were very similar, in some cases they were very different. So it'll be interesting to see how that evolves today and how the discussion leads in that area. So just to orient everyone to the different focus areas that you'll see shown on this slide in the map is the north section. The first area of focus is the I-40 area. And as Adam mentioned yesterday and I'll mention today, it's basically there to look at, but a lot of the data being on the fringe of the study area is a little bit challenging, but we'll look at that. Adam, did you want to just add a little bit to that?
Yeah, so we are recognizing that it will come through the study as a focus area of congestion, but we will recommend for further study. At this point, there's just some level of confidence between regional and statewide data that needs a little bit more validation and review, and so we recognize that it will most likely be an issue on the interstate component, but we certainly also want to consider the local mobility across the interstate. We had some good dialogue about how the interstates serve as barriers for connectivity around Statesville, and so I'm sure that we might continue to have that conversation today. But as of right now, it is certainly just an observed congestion area focus for further investigation and subsequent planning.
Thank you, Adam. The second area of congestion is area around NC 150, right around really the central area of Morrisville. And then moving on down the map, the next is the I-485 area. That's really just the name. The interchange is down at the southern portion of this area, but it includes, as you can see from that map, Davidson, Cornelius, Huntersville. Area 4 is the Asbury Chapel Road and Eastfield Road, and we'll look forward to discussing that. The next section is the metro section, really beginning with the I-85 and I-77 area here in the northern part of this section. Then we'll move down into US 74 and I-277 area, really concentrating on that specific interchange area. And then we'll move over before that to Uptown Charlotte, and really looking at that highly congested area. And then we'll take a look at South Boulevard and Park Road down here in area number 8. As for the south section, we really start to dive into areas in South Carolina, looking first at NC 160 and NC 49 as it traverses north-south, and then we'll take a look at the North Carolina-South Carolina state line. Then we'll look at US 21 and the Fort Mill Southern Bypass area. And then our last focus area of congestion is the South Carolina 161, South Carolina 122 area near Rock Hill. So those will be the 12 focus areas of congestion that we'll be talking about this morning. And with that, are there any questions about any of those areas or anything anybody wanted to say before I move on to mobility issues? All right, so the consultant team identified 7 potential mobility issues that we thought might exist in each one of these study areas or focus areas of congestion. And so we wanted to provide the workshop participants an opportunity to tell us if those were prevalent, and if they were, what's there? What do we, what specifically, what specific information could you provide about each one of those mobility issues if you felt that it was present in the focus area? So the first one was safety and road conditions, and basically that means feeling safe while using the transportation system over all of the modes, whether that's vehicles, walking, biking, using transit. The second issue is mode choice, meaning flexibility to choose alternative travel options, opportunity to make trips via walking or biking, access to transit to key destinations. So just making sure and seeing, wow, I'd really like to walk, but there aren't sidewalks. Or I'd really like to bike, but there aren't bike lanes or a multi-use path for me to use, where it makes sense. So seeing as if that is an issue. Our next two are innovation and network connectivity. For innovation, it's new and emerging transportation technologies that can be applied to an existing system. So seeing where those can be pushed on to really make it a long-range transportation planning exercise. The next mobility issue is network connectivity, defined as system connections to improve travel efficiency, first and last mile connections. We want to make sure if there's an area where there's a transit stop, that you don't just get left off and there's no sidewalks or no other option for connectivity there for use. So identifying those if there's a mobility issue there. The last or two of the last are freight and congestion. So freight is defined really here as congestion or accessibility issues along roadways and significant delay in conducting business. And then congestion really refers to recurring inconsistency of travel times, bottlenecks, really congested areas inside those focus areas. And our final mobility issue that we gave to the group was land use and transportation integration. Talked about this as we talked about vision, guiding principles, and goals, which is defined as the development decision should consider the existing capacity and intended function of a transportation facility, recognizing the impact the development will have on the system and its facilities. In short, it basically means, has there been significant consideration to the integration of transportation and land use when making decisions? A lot of times we do one without the other, and so if that's an issue and that we can look forward to addressing it, then we can. So those were the 7 mobility issues and the 12 focus areas of congestion. Again, we asked the workshop participants to go ahead and identify which mobility issue was prevalent for each of the focus areas. You could pick all 7, you could pick 1, you could pick 0. And then for ones that you picked, if there were specific information or issues that you wanted us to be aware of, then you could include those too. I'll often say that I will never know what somebody who experiences this on a daily basis can tell me or knows, and the things that I will not know and will not be aware of. This is the opportunity to let us know that, so that we can make sure that what we are doing and programs, policy, strategy, solutions, everything that we put in place is working to help those issues in these areas. So we want to dive into Mentimeter again. And so if everybody will go to that menti.com using the code 10478. And what we're going to do here is we're going to ask the participants today on the call to go ahead and do what the homework asked for, to identify the issues that you think are prevalent in each one of these focus areas of congestion. And then we'll look at those responses, then we'll look at what the overall homework assignment responses were, and then open it up for discussion. If you think something is not right, that you think it should be higher, or you think please address this and why you think we should. And then we'll go through that for each of the 12. We're actually going to start in reverse order. We're going to give credence to our South Carolina partners today. We started up at the north section yesterday. I think it makes sense for us to start at the southern section and meet in the middle. So let's switch over to Mentimeter and see if I can get the first question up. So first one is, which mobility options should be considered for South Carolina 161 and South Carolina 122 focus area? And please select all the ones that you think are prevalent in that area, and then we'll talk about them and compare them to what we heard from the homework. And we'll give everybody a few more seconds. And one thing that we will be able to, even if it's not on the screen, continue to answer this question. We will pull all of the information from today's workshop as well as yesterday's to have that on hand so that we can take a look at that. So obviously here, mode choice is leading the pack. Connectivity and congestion are important. And interestingly enough, I'm sorry, let me go back to that. One more for mode choice. But we'll go over back to the slideshow and look at the results. So these are the results from the homework. As you can see, mode choice leads the pack in this area. It's consistent with what just heard today with the real-time survey. Everything else is kind of pretty much the same, but it seems like mode choice was a big issue in this area. Are there any comments or anybody want to discuss or talk about more specifics about maybe mode choice issues down in this area?
Tyler, this is David. SC 161, or what we refer to as Celanese Road, is a road that carries a very large regional travel shed. It serves a very large regional travel shed and collects demand going all the way out to southern Lake Wylie, if you will. And that's where growth is going to accelerate in the years ahead. The challenge here is that this roadway was built for vehicles, period. Transit, other options were not thought about in past decades, and the operating dynamics out there reflect that. One thing I would add to the outcome that you've got up on screen is that congestion is far greater a concern than reflected on the screen right now. The area on Celanese from Mount Gallant to I-77 is the single most congested point in the entire RFATS planning area, by far. And I'd certainly want to highlight that.
Absolutely. Thank you, David. And one thing that I do want to show the group real fast is referencing back to the story map. One of the things that this does very well in identifying those areas of congestion to show you specifically where the most congested roadways are in the system to the travel time index. So you'll be able to see where some of that congestion occurs.
Another thing, Tyler, to keep in mind, and thank you for putting the map up. If you were able to scroll out just a little bit, that would really help illustrate the following point I'm going to make, which is There are two bridge crossings in South Carolina. Both are significant contributors to demand as it moves north toward Charlotte. There's one over in Lake Wylie on the western side of RFATS, there it becomes NC 49. Now look down to that long line there, Celanese Road. The reason the demand level is so high and why this corridor is so critical is it's the only other alternative to gaining access to I-77. And so without mode options, you have a functional parking lot out there during the peak periods. And that is projected to grow by north of 40% over the next 10 years. And one thing that's really important to understand is where it comes into I-77. You've got the big Riverwalk development across the street, and just south of there, you've got the identified location for the new Panther site. And that one connecting point there at Celanese and Cherry and Sell River is projected to have 115,000 vehicles a day crossing through that one interchange location.
Yeah, I don't have to tell you that's a lot of vehicles.
Yes, it is. We've just got some funding from the South Carolina State Infrastructure Bank to reconfigure that interchange because at Celanese, you've got two principal arterial roadways that are effectively sharing one interchange. Cherry Road that's coming up at an angle represents about 30 to 35% of the northbound demand going towards Charlotte each morning.
All right. It's good discussion. Any other discussion from the group on this focus area or any of the mobility issues that were identified?
Tyler, if I can, this is David again. Don't mean to monopolize things, but I would highlight there at SC 122 or Dave Lyle Boulevard, you know, the potential expansion of Dave Lyle over to Lancaster County has been on the radar screen for more than 25 years. And I will say that York County made a decision to acquire a lot of the land near the river. And I think the general sense is that that improvement will not take place in the years ahead. And that just reinforces the importance of how mobility moves northbound from 122 to Celanese and on up to the state line.
All right, thank you, David. Anyone else have anything that they wanted to add for this focus area? All right, I want to bring everybody back to Mentimeter here. And we want to ask the same similar question. Which mobility options should be considered for the US 21 Fort Mill Southern Bypass focus area? So let me bring up in the box, this is what it is. And you can have a good geographic representation and reminder of what area we're talking about. And then we'll go back to the Mentimeter slide to see what the real-time results were. Adam, do you know if it's registering for this question?
I would assume so. Is anybody having trouble? Is it not live on your pages?
It's like I can see that 5 people have submitted, but nothing is coming up.
I don't have an opinion since I'm never in that area.
One second, Tyler. A little technical difficulty here. Hold on.
Fine. There it is. There it is. I don't know, for whatever reason, it wasn't registering there.
Gotcha.
But we could see from the results, very consistent results across the first 5, with land use and congestion being the top. And so as we look at what we received from the homework, see safety down below, but everything else seems to be fairly flat with mode choice. Obviously, the clear favorite here, connectivity and congestion being consistent as well. Are there any comments about what you may see here, confirmations, agreement, or issues with how you see it? All right, seems to be consistent across the board. Lots of mobility issues in this area, and we'll continue to evaluate them and make sure that they're addressed as we move forward. So let me slide back to this, and we'll go to the next section as we move up north. This is the South Carolina, North Carolina state line focus area, and go ahead and select which mobility issues you think are prevalent in that area. Thanks, everybody. Obviously, congestion is what's on everybody's mind in this area, and with land use coming second, and freight identifying as a potential area. As we go back to what we heard from the homework, it was actually mode choice, which was the most important that was identified. And then second in congestion, you see freight up there as well. For those on the call today who selected congestion, could you expand a little bit more on why you selected that for the North Carolina, South Carolina focus area?
Yeah, this is Tim Gibbs with CDOT. I selected that because in North Carolina, we have 6 general purpose lanes right now. In South Carolina, they have 8. So of course, when, the 8 comes into 6, you get a bottleneck, there's congestion. And the I-485 interchange, which is the major interchange south of Uptown Charlotte, that's the roadway that would have the most cross traffic at I-77. You just put all that together, and it's cause for, again, a lot of congestion, and particularly during the peak periods.
Thank you, Tim.
Tyler, this is David. I'd also add that if you think of the RFATS area going north toward the state line, you've got all the major intersections or interchanges, whether it's Celanese, 160, Gold Hill, and then Carowinds all feeding into the same central convergence point and then going north. So you get kind of a slowing naturally, as Tim was saying, as you're approaching I-485. But one of the things you also get down here is that you get overflow, which is when the interstate is not operating in a sufficiently functional manner. You'll get folks that will go up to the left and the right. They'll go up US 21 or they'll go up Sutton to Pleasant, and they'll basically go all the way north to where they can, then turn in at Carowinds, and that just adds to it as everyone is trying to move north at that point. You also have a strong cross current of NC traffic that comes from NC 49 on the west and goes over and through 55 on the east. And that certainly makes for a more congested location as well.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, one thing I'd add is we've put an application in front of the State Infrastructure Bank to do almost a complete rebuild of that interchange. You're looking at a price tag north of $70 million. It's still in discussions, but everyone acknowledges that this location is in need of real attention.
And which interchange?
This is 90. This is Carowinds Boulevard, right there at the state line.
Great, thank you, David. Any other comments on this area? And David mentioned it, and we'll go right to it to answer the next, just as a perfect transition. He knew what slide was coming next. Which mobility options should be considered for the NC 160, NC 49 focus area?
Tyler, certainly don't mean to monopolize things. This is David, but obviously this is trying to get some element of transit out there. You've got a retirement community out there, and then the other half is working folks, many of which are going north. One of the things I think we need to keep in mind is that the planned study of an additional bridge crossing off of New South Hope Road there called the Catawba Crossings in Gastonia or Gaston County, if we don't come up with a transit option or another mobility option coming up 49, those folks are just going to go north up Pole Branch Road up to this new bridge. It's going to put them across the river right there at 485. So it definitely needs to be mode choice, something other than vehicles.
Excellent, thank you, David. And I don't know, maybe when I move out of this, that it doesn't update when I move out of full screen. I'm not sure. See if I can come right back in. Yeah, I want to come right back in. Okay. All right. So obviously congestion is an issue, mode choice as well in here. And so if we tab over to the results from the homework, you see again this one is consistent with mode choice and congestion jumping up to the top. But everything's still really being identified as an issue here. None of the issue options really dropped off in this area.
And Tyler,
David,
just to
sure.
piggyback on what David said, yeah, because you have the river and Lake Wiley there, it does prohibit the east-west access. So therefore, Highway 160 and I-77 end up taking on additional traffic that's not only going north-south, but also is trying to go east and west.
Understood. So they have to go up and go over and then come back down.
Exactly.
It's good insight. Thank you, Tim. Any other comments or questions or any issues with any of the way that the mobility issue results shake out for this area? All right. As we move over to the next one, which mobility options should be considered for the South Boulevard Park Road focus area? See connectivity and congestion leading the results early. Seems like there's a consistent message here. See land use and congestion coming up to the top for this, including mode choice coming up as well. As we look at the results from the homework, so consistent, congestion really high, innovation was a little bit higher. The normal safety, obviously a concern in this area. I believe this is the specific focus area that's closest to the Adkins office and in the Charlotte area. So I know that our James and Adam are very familiar with this area, and so it provided a little bit more insight than for the rest. But are there any comments about what you see here? Obviously, congestion, safety are number one issues. Anything that might be missing here?
Tyler, I think also from the city's perspective, I'm do like David, don't mean to kind of talk so much, but this is in my area, so that's why I'm probably going to weigh in a little more often. But one of the issues is, again, with just the limited capacity of I-77, oftentimes the adjacent roads, traffic will spill over into those. So there's like a ripple effect when I-77 isn't working well, or there are accidents or any sort of issues that would slow traffic down, just the sheer volume, for instance. And so, of course, we have looked at the expanding bike lanes and greenways in those corridors. We're also, another thing that didn't show up a lot on the responses was we at the City of Charlotte are looking at connectivity east-west as well as north-south to do just like I mentioned earlier, where you don't have a lot of options on the west side of Mecklenburg County going into Gaston or into South Carolina. So the north-south roads bear some of the brunt of folks that are really going east-west. And so we're looking at trying to have additional connectivity, which we hope ultimately will take some of the traffic off the interstates and off South Boulevard and Park Road. And that's mostly east-west connectivity, some a little north-south. And David, we're going to have to talk about some of those between South Carolina and North Carolina as well. But the city is kind of thinking about locations where we could potentially have just grade separations, not new interchanges, but grade separations across I-77 to assist with east-west mobility.
Absolutely. We've heard that in the discussions before, where the interstate can bisect or communities, and we want to see about potential options for reconnecting those communities, and not just by vehicular traffic, but also with the ability to use other multimodal options. So you can see the geographic location. Any other discussion about South Boulevard, Park Road area? All right, I think let's zoom in a little bit more so that we can see the US
Tyler, I
74.
think there's a comment in the chat box.
Oh, thank you from Jenny. Safety issues with pedestrian crossing South Boulevard to get to the blue line. So yes, thank you, Jenny. Definitely something that we want to make sure that where we can address this or identify areas that may need additional study outside of the scope of the Beyond 77 study. And we want to make sure that we're identifying those issues so that they can be addressed. So thank you for that, Jenny. So the next one here is mobility options for the US 74 I-277 focus area. So just to reorient everybody, if you can, it's right around the interchange and a little bit into Uptown Charlotte, right in here. Hard to see the blue box on top of the blue land use TAZ information, but I want to make sure it's there for you to see. Let's see, and just to, well, let me, Adam, you said I could select it and it might change the color brighter, but it looks like it's only selecting the TAZ.
Hit the little arrow in the top corner by that X you just clicked.
This?
No. Keep trying to click the box.
Ah,
That arrow.
gotcha.
And eventually
Gotcha.
you'll find it. There
Yep.
you go.
So you can kind of see where that exists. Thank you. So I can see that the answers here: congestion, innovation, safety. I'm interested. This is the first time where it feels like innovation is higher. You'll see the results here are very consistent with the respondents really selecting everything, because I think everything is really a potential mobility issue in this area, or is a mobility issue in this area. But I'm interested, since we saw some thoughts on innovation. For those who selected innovation, would you care to expand a little bit on that?
And Tyler, I think since it's so close to Uptown Charlotte, couple things: the light rail line that's being proposed from Gaston County, that'll come through Uptown and head southeast to Matthews, will cross I-77 somewhere in this area. We typically, for projects that close into Charlotte, we're looking at additional mobility options and opportunities like multi-use paths or rail trails, something on that order. Also, we think because of the high number of trips that come off I-77 going to and from I-277 to jobs in Uptown Charlotte and other destinations, there is so much traffic that uses that corridor and connects from I-277 to I-77. We want to try to figure out a way to make that, either give additional connectivity options or do something to improve that connection, because the interchange that's there now was built in like early 1970, and it's really functionally obsolete at this time. So that's a big concern for the city, and I think for CRTPO as well.
Thank you, Tim. Any other discussion for this area? And I think it's pretty evident from what we see here that everything is really a concern, and so this is something that we really want to take a hard look at, and see what can be done and achieved in this area. So the next question we have on Minty is the mobility options should be considered for Uptown Charlotte area, and I'll see if we can get over here to this map. So we can see it a little bit better. And that entire focus area really focuses or includes all of the area, really encompasses of 277 and a little bit beyond that. So we'll give a few seconds for a few more responses. And the responses for this one are fairly consistent with yesterday's discussion, and really interesting. I like the consistency here. We heard a lot yesterday about innovation in this area. So I'm interested, again, to hear from somebody who may have selected innovation as to what their thoughts are on that in the Uptown Charlotte focus area.
And Tyler, this is Tim again. So one thing I think about that is just the ability to transfer from one mode to another. It's not going to be as it is now that folks drive into Uptown, park in a parking deck, go in their office, come out, get in the car and leave. I think there are going to be so many more opportunities with the development that you're going to see in the area. We're not going to have as many opportunities for everybody's not going to be guaranteed a parking space, I guess is what I'm saying. So we need to figure out how we can actually move between modes and make that interaction a little more smooth, so it would occur a little more smoothly, I guess is what I'm saying.
Absolutely understood. Some of the discussion yesterday was centered around the ability, well, you're not going to really be able to widen any of the roads in Uptown Charlotte anymore. The land is pretty much built to the way it's going to be. So what are we going to do to maximize the area that's available? And so innovative solutions and options are probably going to be one of the things that are going to be real prevalent in this area moving forward. I kind of think it's interesting. You mentioned the parking decks. One of the things we talked about and was mentioned earlier today about really planning for the future and developing plans that don't sit on the shelf and are really based on a future transportation system. One of the things you mentioned, parking decks. Well, we need those parking decks if you have shared vehicles and the vehicle ownership goes down, and really if you need some sort of personal mobility option, you just call it up on your phone or some other device. And so they're always moving, and they're always using they're always moving around the urban center and not necessarily just parked for an extended period of time, and you don't really own it. So there are a lot of things to consider and to look at for what might exist in the future and moving forward. So I'm right in line with that, Tim. Any other comments about any of the mobility issues that are shown here or the results that we've seen from today in the Uptown Charlotte area? All right, so as we move up the corridor, the next one is the mobility options in the I-85 focus area. Again, this is right around the I-85, I-77 interchange, but does also include surrounding areas as well.
Okay, we got 3 people taking the survey. What's going on?
Yeah, and this is the opportunity. If there's an issue that you want us to be aware of, that you want to make sure that we address and we don't miss, this is the opportunity to do that for us, especially as we move through the northern part of the corridor, getting out a little bit more into the suburban and rural settings and outside of the urban centers. I think it's important for us to have a really good understanding of any issues in the corridor that you want us to focus on. So it appears here that safety and congestion are major issues, not surprisingly so. Especially as you talk about the interchange. It's probably the one interchange in Charlotte that I am most familiar with. And I still don't know which lane drops. I get it wrong every time that I drive through. So as coming around the interchange to go south on 77. So it's certainly on my mind whenever I visit Charlotte. And this is consistent with what we heard over the homework. Safety, congestion, obviously with 2 interstate facilities, the mode choice options are going to be limited around in that region. Speaking earlier, Tim talked about the ability to connect over the interstates and make sure that there are equitable options for everybody, so that we don't have bisected communities that are segregated. So we want to integrate them as best we can. So you can see that in this area, mode choice and safety and congestion were obviously the top, but everything is really an issue, identified issue in this area that we need to keep in mind as we move forward with solutions development. Does anybody want to add any comments, anything specific? Is there any issue with anything that you see here, or you think something should be higher up?
Hey Tyler, this is Jessica from Central Atlanta. I just wanted to point out that I know this is I-77, but on I-85 at I think Westbrook, City of Charlotte and NCDOT put up a lot of no truck parking on the on-ramp, which was a huge place, a very popular place for trucks to stop and rest. And that with those signs and towing enforcement have removed that option. So from a freight and safety perspective, this seems to be a location where a lot of trucks, get off the interstate, get gas or diesel and get back on or rest. And I think we need to take a look at, is there an opportunity to provide safe locations for them to rest?
Sure, Jessica, thank you. I'll just pose this question because I don't know the answer. Maybe Adam or Augustine or you knew the answer. Has there been a truck parking study done for the region?
It was part of the regional freight plan, but NCDOT with Cambridge Systematics, I think 2 years ago, maybe completed a statewide truck parking study. And in the last year have been working towards identifying some recommendations and some solutions. So I would recommend looking at the statewide truck parking initiative that NCDOT and Cambridge have been working on.
And if maybe, go ahead.
This is Gene. One of the companies I work with, Intelligent Imaging Systems and DriveWise, provided a lot of the freight data to that study, Cambridge's study. I think they came out with several recommendations. In the eastern part of the state, they recommended building more capacity. In Charlotte and the western part of the state, they recommended more information availability to truckers. And since DriveWise has the connected truck platform, that was one of the options, is to have truck parking spaces funneled through the DriveWise app and provided to truckers as they come into the region. So I can give you more details on all that stuff as necessary. But Jessica, it's a very important problem in the Charlotte region for sure.
Sure. Did you feel that that study or what they provided was specific enough to the Charlotte region, or is this a continued area that needs a little bit more analysis?
It might need more analysis, but I think if I can probably get a hold of the study from Cambridge or from DOT. David Howard is the one who commissioned it. So we can look at it and see what more detail might be necessary. But again, I think in the western part of North Carolina, it's not so much availability of spaces, it's telling people where the spaces are and when.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
And we talked.
Jessica's posted it on the.
Oh, there we go.
Thank you. And so, Tyler, to answer your question, I think it would benefit the region to look closer than what the state has done.
Yeah, and as I mentioned before, we might be identifying areas for additional study that might be outside of the scope of this study, but that would warrant more detailed analysis so that we could get some more concrete options in there. But we'll certainly take a look at that. I know this has been brought up multiple times today, so I think it's something that we've identified as important to the study area. Any more comments on the I-85 focus area?
This is Agustin. Yes, we have a couple of comments from Tim Gibbs, NCDOT. Say that NCDOT has a feasibility study that has identified options for the total rebuild of the interchange, and also added another comment saying that NCDOT is looking at options for RAM metering on I-85 from I-77 north towards Concord. And I believe we have Dominic Boyd. I don't know if he has anything to add to those comments from Tim or anybody from this group, from the group. But thank you, Tim and Jessica, for the feedback.
Absolutely. We talked a little bit yesterday about the timing of potential interchange improvements, and I think it was a ways out for anything specific to a project right in that location. But we'll certainly take a look at that feasibility study, and as well as the truck parking study. So thank you guys for sending that along. I appreciate it. So the next focus area that we want to look at is the Asbury Chapel Eastfield Road focus area, and what the mobility options might be in that arena. So let me bring up that map as well while people are filling in the Mentimeter question. And one of the things that I didn't mention, but as anybody on the team who's looked at the story map can tell you, if you dive into this and under land use and mobility connections where I'm showing on the screen, you can see this really prevents you from having to read the entire report on existing conditions and analysis, and really dives into what are the issues, why was this identified as a focus area, and so you can see some of the specifics here brought up in the definition of this congestion area. So as we look, it looks like we only had one respondent for Asbury Chapel Eastfield Road. Let me see if I exit and come back in. There we go. Now let's go back to the presentation. Yeah, still only one that's coming in. But we can move over to the results from the homework for this area. It was really kind of flat, kind of consistent across most of them. Mode choice again. It really showed up as one of the major mobility issues across the entire region, and it's shown up here as well. But then everything else had the exact same response rate for this area, so really, really consistent. Does anyone have any comments on anything anything that you see here? Do you think one should be much higher than it is and kind of separate itself from the pack, or you think this is pretty consistent with the area? One of the things that was interesting about this is that they were talking about there wasn't a lot of bicycle pedestrian options outside of neighborhood areas, and that it wasn't, this area is not really suited for anything related to freight traffic, but that there have been some improvements that have really helped, and so they're hoping to see more of those. All right, we can go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry about that. And go ahead and move on. I'm sorry, I think I went too far. Let's see. Yep. So which mobility options should be considered for the I-485 focus area? I want to go to the land use and mobility connection for this one because I don't want it to be, it's identified as such, but it's much longer than that. So I wanted to show it here on the map so everybody would be oriented in the right place. So the I-485 congestion area really starts even below I-485 and 77 and includes Huntersville, Cornelius, and areas of Davidson on the north end. So it's really a large area. Obviously, this has been a primary focus of improvement for a long time. And with the amount of growth that's going on in this area, I actually used to have family that lived in Huntersville, and I can remember when there was nothing out here except maybe a bowling alley and a couple cash and quick stops, and that was pretty much it. And it has now exploded. So I have a lot of issues in this area. So as we look back at this, let's dive over into our results from the homework. See that in this area, it's very interesting that there were a lot of responses for mode choice. A lot of the study will be focused on the facilities and the multimodal connections outside or off of Interstate 77. And so you see that mode choice brings it to the top. There's consistency among the other elements, congestion, connectivity, innovation. So we see some consistent messaging here. But again, this is another area when you've asked the question about what the focus area result or what the mobility issues are, that mode choice comes up. And you'll see that prevalent in our vision, guiding principles, and goals, that we need to ensure that we have equitable mobility options across all modes available to everybody that uses this corridor, giving them a broad range of options to get around, as we'll be dealing with long trips as well as very detailed areas with mixed use, and making sure that those options are available to the citizens that live in those areas. And so we've got to look, we have so many different things that we have to juggle across this long corridor. So Tim, I see that you have provided a comment in the chat box that the majority of through traffic has been diverted to I-485, so congestion isn't currently a big problem for the Eastfield Asbury Chapel area. Did you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yes, yeah. Basically, what I was saying was that there was not a lot of east-west, and we talk a lot about east-west connectivity as part of this study. Is like, again, going from one side of 77 to the other is pretty much problematic throughout the corridor, in particular within Charlotte. And so what happened in the Eastfield Asbury area was that once 485 opened, and it's 8 through lanes, basically 4 in each direction, a lot of the traffic in that area of Charlotte and Huntersville actually migrated to the interstate. So a lot of the north-south trips and a lot of the east-west trips were occurring along I-485. So therefore, Eastfield Road, which at one time we thought needed to be widened yesterday, right now we're doing okay with all those roads in that area, and it's primarily because of the opening of I-485.
Sure, and then that's great. Tim, just for my curiosity, when 485 is opened, and if you have an interstate option that's not as congested necessarily as other facilities, but longer, and so it can be faster but longer. And for myself, I would prefer that, but not everybody does. Do you see that people are willing to travel the longer distance if they can continue to move?
Yes, that's absolutely what we did a before and after study at CDOT of what happened before 485 opened in the area and after it did. And that's what we saw is folks were much more likely to take the route that was quicker versus one that might have actually been shorter.
Okay, thank you. So Neil, I see that you've provided a comment also in the chat box about bicycle and pedestrian facilities needed between Huntersville and North Mecklenburg, and that to have some sort of greenway connection between Huntersville and maybe UNC Charlotte. I want to zoom maybe out a little bit, just to kind of, and I'm going to turn off this box so we can see this. But Huntersville and coming down here towards the office. So can you just orient the group a little bit about what's missing in this area as far as bike and ped?
Sure, Tyler. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So my point behind that is, Huntersville, Cornelius, and Davidson, they're building their own greenway systems. They're trying to link those up, but I see a gap that's kind of existing between, say, Huntersville's greenway network and what's planned in Charlotte. So, just thinking about bicycle and pedestrian mobility along the corridor, it's getting better, when you get north of 485, but there's a gap that kind of exists if you're trying to ride a bike, say from Huntersville down to either uptown Charlotte or over to the university area. You have to be on some pretty high volume roads, which probably discourages most casual bicyclists from making a trip like that. So just consideration into trying to get some more bicycle and pedestrian connectivity between Huntersville and Charlotte would be an important consideration here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Neil.
Sure.
Any other comments for this area, either about from the northern section, maybe in Davidson or Cornelius, with some of the mobility issues in that area? Okay, well, again, just as a reminder, as things come up or ideas percolate in your mind, and then you want us to be aware of something else, please feel free at any time to reach out to any member of the consultant team or CRTPO or RFATS, and we'll continue to include that information. Would love to hear from everybody. So as we move forward, let's see if that'll work. Wanted to look at the NC 150 area and see what the mobility issues are maybe in that focus area. Let me bring up the map. So if you're looking at the screen, you can see kind of what we're talking about. And really it's NC 150, but it's really centered around just the Morrisville town center.
Hey, Tyler, this is Neil again. I know that, one of the issues in Mooresville has just been east-west connectivity between the west side of Mooresville and the east side. There's a couple of different TIP projects that are intended, the scope's intended to really facilitate that local movement across town. There's the Midnight Oats overpass over 77 that's in the TIP just north of exit 36 there. And then there's what's the other one? Fairview Road extension down near the Lowe's corporate campus, which again will bring another overpass over I-77. So that's primarily been the issue, is really there's not many places to cross I-77 other than at an interchange, and the interchanges have kind of become the choke points. So there's several projects up there, provided that they can move forward with NCDOT's funding issues that will help expedite that east-west local movement.
Yeah, so I don't think you've seen the homework results, but you absolutely nailed them. Connectivity wins in this area. So I think that everybody is experiencing and realizing the same things that you brought up. Certainly something that we want to look at and be aware of in this area. Sometimes I think it was mentioned before that we can be very reactive in what we do and very slow in our reactions as transportation planners. And it takes, and we might all want it yesterday, but sometimes it just takes a little bit longer than we would like. And I know there's a lot of questions about, like, what are we waiting on? Didn't you guys know? Well, some things happen very quickly, and then you have to give time to respond. And so we want to make sure and respond correctly with the best available data, so that we're building connections that will enhance the system for the future. So we'll continue to look at that. But obviously, you can see here, everything is really an issue in the Morrisville area, but connectivity kind of rose to the top and a little bit higher than it is in some of the other areas. Any other comments in the Morrisville or NC 150 area that we want to talk about? Before we move on to the last area, one of the things that I haven't mentioned yet, but is a consistent message I've seen across a lot of these focus areas is too many traffic signals. We see a lot of that, that same comment over and over. So I was wondering if anybody in the group had any thoughts or any insights or anything that may be in the works to help with that, or if there's anything going on in the I-77 corridor region to maybe help address that.
Tyler, this is Neil again. I think some of that might be a function of connectivity, like what we were talking about before, when you only have a couple of east-west routes, a couple of north-south routes when you get near the lake. You really are kind of up against a wall in terms of signalizing almost every major intersection. But when you can add more connectivity and when you can maybe pursue some innovative intersection and interchange designs like DDIs or even reduce conflict intersections, that's probably one way to optimize the amount of traffic signals you need along a corridor.
Sure, and as I mentioned before, we're really looking at this study we're relying on plans that have been in place, MTP and others, to really identify those specific project level improvements, and for us to kind of really be focused on strategies and policies and programs and things of that nature. Doesn't mean that we won't identify specific projects that we feel need to be added to the study area to enhance or to fix hopefully some of these mobility issues. But we will continue as we receive information and comments from others and from our stakeholders, that we relay that information that we receive to make sure that those things can be addressed through other mechanisms as well outside of the study scope.
Tyler, it's Dr. Mike.
Yes, sir.
You'd mentioned traffic signals. I think I mentioned before that Cornelius, along with NCDOT and the vendor, are doing a pilot study on our West Catawba, which is our main east-west turning south road through Cornelius. These are adaptive signal technology where the signals, there's 7 traffic signals that talk to each other that change their signaling based on demand rather than a time schedule. This is the first project of its type in North Carolina. It's currently down because one of our custom traffic masts got taken out by a dump truck, and we have to wait for a new mast to be constructed. But when it was up, it seemed to be helpful because it was, you got a green light and you went all the way through town, much nicer than getting a stop every so often. But just that kind of innovation is coming.
Absolutely. And a lot of these things that can be implemented, it's an innovative solution, but it also addresses kind of congestion and other than safety and other things. So it's not just specific to one of these mobility issues, but crosses the line. And that's a really good example of that. I think I'm actually friends with the traffic engineer in the town of Cary, and I think that they're looking at something similar as well. So that's really great to see that type of innovation coming to North Carolina.
Tyler, this is David. Kind of building off of Dr. Mike's observation, here in RFATS, we too, working with SCDOT, have decided to incorporate the adaptive traffic control signals, the so-called smart signals, on the SC-160 corridor leading into I-77, as well as up on Carowinds Boulevard. I think most of the data suggests that you can extract another 20% operating efficiency without a capacity addition. And that's certainly part of the solution. And we're going to pursue it and place it where it makes operational sense. One of the challenges we have, though, is that it loses its utility during the peak periods when you've got the corridor processing as much as it can. The signals kind of max out, if you will. Where they really help us is as conditions change throughout the day, we can clear the roadways before the peak periods resume. One of the other things that I think is relevant here is not having the planning process dealing with the built environment after the fact. And what I'm getting at is we need to be more proactive, and I hope we find a place in this study dealing with access management. I think given how the region has evolved, we're basically forcing many of our elected officials to revisit decisions of prior boards and revisit the hard decisions, that everyone doesn't get their own driveway. Convenience is going to have to give way to safety and demand needs along the corridor. And if that means more shared driveways, routing along the side roads so that every single trip doesn't have to be done on these major corridors adjacent to the interstate, then that's what it means.
Yep, I think you must have been talking with Bob Cook yesterday, because he made the exact same point yesterday. And I think it's an issue in my entire career that everybody wants a driveway cut, but not everybody needs a driveway cut. And there's a lot of safety, congestion, and other issues that get worse as we have access management issues along corridors across the transportation system. So
Yeah,
something absolutely we need to look at as well. Thank you.
And Tyler, real quick, I think we need to be comfortable with this one aspect of it, which is when a region grows as rapidly as ours has, I mean, let's be candid. Boards, elected officials want to be sufficiently flexible because there's economic development objectives that can be realized. You've got good developments that can occur. And that flexibility and that kind of decision-making environment is understandable. But we do need to put this, that we're going to have to come back and do some fine tuning to make it work operationally as well as it can.
Sure, absolutely. Any other overall comments before we go into our last focus area? It doesn't have to be specific to the areas shown on the screen or NC 150. All right, well, we'll dive into our last focus area is I-40. And this, as Adam mentioned before, is right on the outskirts of, right on the edge of the system. And so we'll be looking at some mobility issues here, but really in probably more of an area of additional study in the future. So as answers come in, let me zoom out so that we can see. I think most people are familiar with the region, but we'll move up there. And while everybody's answering and I'm doing this, I did want to say, just because we've identified a specific area of focus for congestion does not mean that we will not be looking at the entire corridor. We will be certainly evaluating a lot of things outside of these 12 focus areas, but these were the areas identified, the biggest issues, whether there was a lot of mixed use or different varying land uses, congestion issues, other things, but we'll be continuing to look at the entire area from programmatic or policy or strategic way. So looking at the I-40 focus area, connectivity seems to be high up on the list, freight issues, some other safety as well. And you can see from the results of the homework assignment, mode choice, and then safety, and you have congestion and connectivity But I think, again, this leans to probably the way that we had worded things, that when you have a focus area that is centrally located across a major interchange between two interstates, the connections for and the options for different types of modes, bike, being able to walk, or transit facilities may be limited, and that's why you see the response rate in the area of mode choice. And then when you start to think of it more locally, and you've heard some of the discussion today, maybe some of the other issues become more prevalent in your mind. So are there any comments with how this looks? Do you think something is a little bit too low, needs to be focused on a little bit more important here? Any other comments on the I-40 focus area? All right. Well, again, as you think about these areas, and you have additional comments, additional questions, or just things you want us to be aware of, more specifics, just let us know. That would greatly greatly enhance the ability of the team to identify what the specific issues are in these areas, and see what we can do through the study to present solutions and strategies to address those. So please feel free to reach out with any issues as well. So with that, I'd like to turn it to Adam for a few minutes just to recap some of our mobility issues discussion. And before he starts, I will say that we will combine the information that we received in the real-time poll results today with tomorrow, or with yesterday, to see kind of what comes up to the top, compare that with what we had from the homework assignment, and see where we stand, and then really identify some of the major mobility issues in these focus areas. And then we'll move forward, making sure that we use the analysis done before and identifying those focus areas along with this exercise to really set the foundation and set the stage for us moving forward. So Adam, I'll turn it over to you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Tyler. And thanks everybody for hanging out with us this morning. I know that this has been quite a bit of information to review, especially in such a virtual setting. So thank you for working through it with us and giving us some valuable feedback. Going through these 12 focus areas and just discussing these mobility issues, we have heard some very similar comments yesterday, but also some new ones. And David Hooper, thank you for participating and being available today, because we have gotten some new added insight that was not necessarily a part of our call yesterday, especially south of the border into South Carolina. So super helpful, and we'll certainly want to continue discussions with you as we move forward on this project. I don't have much else to add on that. We heard a lot about safety. Safety was obviously one of the critical points of the mobility options. So we will look and see how those can be captured effectively and how we draft these up and present to CRTPO, and then moving forward into some of our solutions and strategy recommendations for the project. And then Tim, will also look to you in coordinating with some of the work that NCDOT is doing along the highway itself and some of the major interchange overhauls that are coming through and planning concepts. I do know, Tim, I also connected with you early on to look and see what the city in coordination with the state is doing with I-277 and the feasibility studies on that. So we do have a little bit of time left, and I would love to throw another additional question out there, and either you might have an answer right off the top of your head, or if you have thoughts, please go ahead and email them over to us. But we didn't have the time to ask it yesterday, and my question really is, what are your thoughts and or projections on how, in this planning study and other planning efforts, should we focus on the impacts that we're experiencing in the short term from the COVID-19 pandemic? And Tim or other folk, maybe David Hooper in South Carolina, and how things are working, would love to understand kind of from your perspective, what, if anything, is being discussed on how we are looking to project a potential shift, or if we're still very much in the early on stages and we're still going to be waiting to look and review that information in a year's time from now.
And I think, Adam, from my perspective, one of the things we saw initially was I would come into work. I live in Union County, work downtown, and my thought was, there's no need for me to have a job anymore because there were no traffic issues at all. I mean, you could come in at 8 in the morning, and I live in Wingate, and I was downtown at my desk in like 35 minutes, which was totally unheard of previously.
Wow.
But what we've seen, with the various stages like that we've been in, that each time, folks are getting a little more flexible on their mobility. We've seen the traffic increase. So the thing is, we're trying to figure out how this is going to shake out in the long term. Is there more need for, like what's going to happen with transit, for instance? I mean, because right now, the buses were running for free for a good while. I think they still are. Don't see a lot of people on them because folks are scared of the distancing issue. So I think we're still in a wait and see mode as to, what's going to happen. But we've definitely, there have been marked changes from, the time the pandemic first started to what we're seeing now. And, it just depends on how things shake out in the end as to how we address some of our mobility issues. Because right now, I think we're not sure.
Sure. Absolutely. No, I appreciate that feedback. And I'd be curious also as to, since you're still commuting on somewhat a regular basis, are you seeing maybe a potential shift, at least in the short term, on what we define as a peak period, if it even exists?
Well, I think,
Yes. Yeah, I think what I've seen is that it's definitely, it's still spread out, but the peaks that were the really high peaks, not really seeing those now. It's spread out, it seems like, over a longer period because I think folks are maybe not being in the office for 8 hours a day or working a typical schedule like they worked in the past. And so what I've seen in particular on US 74 going into Matthews and into Union County, there's a time of day, and it might actually be from 12 to 6,
Sure.
where you're seeing like heavier traffic than you would normally see, in particular in those earlier hours. And so it seems like things have just spread out a little more, and the peak may not be as high, is what I've noticed.
Gotcha. Any other comments, or Dr. Mike? Yes.
Yeah, I still think we're still early in this, trying to find our new normal. I think employers have seen that, yes, people can work from home, maybe not exclusively, but flexible. And I think they're going to reassess, well, how much of this expensive office space do I need to really rent uptown? I think you'll see operations move to the periphery more, and that's going to affect the use of travel lanes. But we'll just see how it shakes out. I think it's too early to tell.
All right. Very good.
Adam, this is David. This is somewhat related to what Dr. Mike just said, which is, as employers have learned what their staff can do from home, I think this may represent an opportunity for us to advance travel demand management. It's often something we talk about, but we don't really get the employer buy-in. And I'd like, if there's a way for us not to lose this opportunity to gain some ground here, because we all talk about the capacity limitations and the other things, whether it's a follow-up discussion with employers, whether it's trying to find a way to incentivize them to go along with this once they've seen a real-time illustration of what can be accomplished, because that will, I think, that's applicable to all the planning agencies within the region, and obviously has a direct operational impact on the study area we're discussing this morning.
David, that's some really good feedback, and I appreciate that specific topic. As you know, we're working on developing another workshop in a couple months that's going to focus on innovation, and as we've highlighted earlier, the innovation can be applied to any aspect of what we're talking about today, which can include travel demand management. And so we have certainly been engaging with members and leadership at the new Charlotte Regional Business Alliance that represents the entire kind of chamber community throughout the metro region. And so having them at the table along with some other business leadership certainly could aid in that discussion of innovation, and that could be one of those topics. So really looking forward to maybe expanding on that in a couple months.
Sure, Adam, this is Tyler. Those are all excellent points. I think one of the, just to bring it back to your initial question, I think one of the things that I'm interested to see is this a short-term thing that we're concerned with, or is this a market disruptor that changes things for years to come? In a year and a half, will people just be 2 feet apart again, not wearing masks, riding buses like normal, going into offices again, and just going back to the lives that they've become accustomed to? Or will this be a complete shift? Well, companies are realizing actually, if you cut out that 2 to 3 hours that people are using as commuting, and they're actually working, and if they're at home, they have the flexibility to work when they can, because if they have kids or whatever the case may be, or what other distractions they may have, where they need to be engaged at different times of the day, but that allows them to be just as productive or maybe even more productive. As those sort of questions flesh out, do we actually see a complete shift? Do we see a lot of people wanting to walk more and more engaged with their health, or bike more and not necessarily want to use their vehicles for those reasons? It'll be interesting to see if what we're going through now has long-term impact. And I think Dr. Mike said it right. It goes back to the COVID-19, just the virus itself, that we are so early on in the process, we just don't really know how everything's going to shake out. And so I'm encouraged and interested to see really what happens.
Yeah, there's so much about this virus we still don't know. We don't know, how effective the vaccine will be, and also will herd immunity actually occur? Lot to see yet.
Sure. Well, I definitely appreciate the feedback and just the dialogue on that. It's something that we certainly don't want to be ignoring, and obviously we still have plenty of time in this study to continue to learn about what we need to be doing as a part of this project, but also how our entire how our current new normal is going to evolve, and how we address that with all of you as committee members and CRTPO as the lead agency on this project. So thank you for that feedback, and if you have additional feedback, would love to hear it. And so just one other piece is I do want to throw that reminder out of Loretta Barron had to leave us a little early today, but just a quick reminder regarding the defining of equitable mobility and what that means to you and or your jurisdiction. So would love to hear your feedback. If you can send me an email, or to Augustine Rodriguez at CRTPO, and we can certainly review and incorporate into our final vision, guiding principles, and goals. So with that, Tyler, I will throw it back to you, and you can kind of show us the next steps before we go back to
Hey, Adam, this is Dean. Can I just add one thing to that? And folks, this is to you, because I think what we're going to do at Atkins is we're going to poll internally our larger group to try to get some input from them on how they view our vision and equitable mobility. And I guess I would encourage each of the stakeholders here to do the same. Don't take it on as your own personal definition, but poll your folks internally to see gather some collective input, and then just forward that on to Adam or Tyler.
Thanks, Dean.
Thank you, Dean. Thanks. And just to close this out today, just want to say we shown on the website and to the public, we're really currently in phase 2, but actually we're here. We're right in the middle of analysis and solutions. And so after today, and after we digest all of the information that we've heard, come together as a team, we'll be able to move forward with a solid foundation of vision, guiding principles, goals, and then mobility issues for each of the focus areas of congestion to move forward into our phase 3 of solutions, really starting to look at innovative options, evaluation criteria, and other areas. So we're looking forward to that opportunity just to kind of show it a little bit visually. We're in the vision and mobility issues today. We'll be heading towards innovation brainstorming, and then solution scenarios development, and then the prioritization of those, and not the prioritization that maybe you might be familiar with STI, but just prioritizing the different types of solutions, and then looking at funding for the solutions and strategies and then final recommendations coming out of the study. And so with that, on behalf of the entire team, CRTPO, RFATS, the consultant team, Atkins and our partners, we want to thank you for your help. We want to create pathways for success in this study area, looking beyond 77 and really being bold and bringing some new ideas to the region. And if you have any specific questions, feel free to reach out to Augustine Rodriguez or Adam Howe, and we'll continue to engage with you and the public and our other stakeholders and elected officials. And then on behalf of the team, I really thank you for your time. I know this was a long 3-hour workshop, but very valuable to us. So thank you again, and everybody, please stay safe and have a wonderful day.
So one last comment. So I want to wrap up this meeting or workshop. So again, thank you so much. I see a couple of people are taking off right now, but before everybody leaves, I just want to make sure that, again, thank you so much for the stakeholders or members of the committees for joining us today. I know this is extremely difficult conducting a workshop via virtually, but the feedback from this group is extremely important for those final goals, those solutions, those recommendations for this study, and in general for the outcome of this initiative. And so because of that, it's very important that you stay engaged and take advantage of, we have that website, the beyond77.com. We also have the story map. Hopefully before the end of this week, we're gonna have the GIS map. I'll be sending information about that once it's ready. And then hopefully again, by the end of next week or sooner, we're gonna have the beginnings of the phase 2 with the public engagement. And so all of these are tools and resources for your feedback. So thanks again. And we'll be here for a little bit. If you have additional comments or anything that you want to discuss, I'll be here. I'm gonna stay here until everybody leaves in the meeting. But if no further questions, Adam or anybody else from the consultant team, then we are adjourned. And again, thank you for your time.
All right.